Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Texas Rangers Daily. It is a Turn the Page Tuesday here in Texas Rangers Daily. That's right, the 2025 season it's over. We talked about it, we eulogized it last episode. So today, we are going to turn the page and to do some of the stuff we talked about at the end of last episode and dissect a little bit of the 2025 season, because yes, it might be a Turn the Page Tuesday, but let's still talk about it. Let's still talk about it. And that's what we're going to do here today on Texas Rangers Daily, because I have the start of our monthly breakdown of the 2025 season. We're going to start with March and April a little bit later on in the show. I'm also going to go over some deadline duds, because I talked about Merrill Kelly being a very big disappointment when it came to a deadline deal. So I'm going to go over a few deadline deals starting from 2009, because that's about when the Rangers started, this modern contendership, I would say. That is going to be our starting point, and then we're going to do it to about 2025 at Merrill Kelly and discuss some of the bad deadline deals, or at least some of the dud deadline deals that happened during that time. We'll also be breaking down the Minnesota Twins. I'm about to do that right now because we have a series against them. Well, the Rangers have a ding. I need a wee bell. We're gonna get a little small bell and call it the wee bell, and I have to ring it every time I say we. The Rangers will be playing the Minnesota Twins. I'll be doing a breakdown of them in just a moment, and Chris Young had his final 105-3 interview with the G-Bag Nation, and we'll be, I have a few notes, few observations from listening, and we'll go over that. But first things first, it's time to introduce you to the Minnesota Twins. If you haven't heard of the Minnesota Twins, well, they're a team in Minnesota that used to be the Washington Senators. I was really happy about that fact. I totally forgot that the Twins used to be the Senators. So when I was just doing my initial research on the 2025 Twins, I rediscovered that the Washington Senators moved to Minnesota before they moved to Texas. So the Minnesota Twins are managed by Rocco Baldelli. They are a tale of two halves. First half of the season, they were treading above water, only 2 games below 500 at 47 and 49, and then the bottom fell out somehow, 20 and 40 in the second half. They have a .387 winning percentage on the road, and that bodes well for your Texas Rangers as they are playing them at home at Globe Life Field. Now, they had a really surprising, the Minnesota Twins had a really surprisingly good May. They went 18 and 8. Then the next month, they kind of reversed course somehow and went 9 and 18. So that's kind of where they're at, because they never recovered. And that's where you're kind of getting them right now. 3 and 7 in their last 10. And if you extrapolate that out a little bit further, 3 and 15 in their last 20, or they're 5 and 15 in their last 20, I'm sorry. And 6 of those losses, they've given up double-digit runs. This is not a good baseball team whatsoever, but the Rangers, they lose to bad baseball teams. They've done that all year long. And this isn't a young team. So sometimes when you think of, a bad team, you automatically assume that they're young and, developing, all that stuff. But this Twins team has 5 of their 8 players over the age of 27 that have played more than 100 games. So this is not a young team. This is a team that, at core, that just really hasn't blossomed the way it was supposed to. And the Rangers pitching staff could have a little fun with the Minnesota Twins, because they've had an uptick in strikeouts per game the past couple of weeks. Their average right now, in the major leagues is 8.38. That's the Minnesota Twins' average strikeouts per game. It's been an uptick the past 2 weeks to a 9.46, which means that the Texas Rangers pitchers could and probably should have a lot of K's next to their name, and you're actually going to have a lot of give-up at bats, I think both sides too. Expect these 3 games to go quickly, because I think both of these teams want the season to be over. The Twins can't hit on the road. They hit .230 on the road with a .271 batting average with balls in play on the road. They only have a .697 OPS on the road. But something happens whenever the Twins play the Rangers, because a .795 slugging percentage when it comes to facing the Rangers over the Minnesota Twins' long history they share with the Texas Rangers. And here we go right here. The Minnesota Twins have a couple of stars you do have to worry about. They do have a little bit of offensive firepower, mainly coming from, and finally, because this is a guy who I think had, a lot of praise bandied about him the very beginning of his career. In 2019 was a really big year for him. But Byron Buxton finally is pretty healthy. He played he had the most career at bats ever. So he had his career high in home runs, career high in OPS, and still, stole 24 bases. So the speed's still there. I think he's a very comparable player to Wyatt Langford when it comes to how much is expected of him versus, maybe the production that's actually coming. Wyatt stayed a bit healthier, but, both have had injury issues. And Luke Keeschel is another player, very young. He's a 22-year-old, second-round draft pick from 2023 from Arizona State. 40 games into his MLB career. He's batting .304 with an .828 OPS. The kid's playing well. But that's really about it for what they have to look forward to. When it comes to pitching matchups, you're going to get Zebby Matthews today. He's 4-6 with a 5.97 ERA. I think I wrote down he gave up 9 runs in his last start, so expect him to struggle. Taj Bradley, the Rangers touch him up for a 5.03 ERA every time they face him. And then it's going to be determined for the final matchup because Pablo Lopez got hurt, some forearm tightness, so he's getting shut down. And so that's where we're at with the Minnesota Twins coming in to face our Texas Rangers here on Texas Rangers Daily. If you're going to one of these games, please comment below. Also subscribe. If you're watching this and you haven't subscribed, please just go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's right down there. It doesn't take long, and it really helps me out. It helps Fan Arch out right over there. See, and especially if you enjoy the show, go ahead and subscribe, and we can do a lot more fun stuff and have a bigger reach. Speaking of huge reach, 105.3 The Fan has a huge reach. The Texas Rangers, are very blessed to be with a station like that, in my opinion, because they have such a large reach, especially, working with the Dallas Cowboys as well. So, Chris Young has an interview with 105.3 The Fan every Monday. This was his final interview with the G-Bag Nation, and I wanted to go over a couple of observations that I had and notes that I had. One, the biggest one to me, is that Simeon Seager will not be playing for the rest of the year, most likely. There's a chance, but Chris Young said there's no reason to risk it because there's nothing really to play for. That's also a big note. Chris Young has basically waved the white flag, has said that over 500 is the goal for the team, no longer even trying to fight for any kind of playoff spot, and being competitive against Cleveland in the last series to compete, keep competitive balance within the league. So that was really that shows where his focus is. His focus is now on the offseason, where it should be. What would they have done differently? That was a great question from Gavin. He admits that things like the offense needed more attention, but he really thought that the players that they had were so much better than their production, and thought the production would catch up. But we kept seeing as fans, and the media kept seeing as well, that it just wasn't going to happen. And apparently that is something now that Chris Young, I think, regrets. Is DeGrom going to pitch one more game? Yes, he will. Is Bochy going to coach one more season? He doesn't know. He hadn't had any conversations with Bochy about the future. So we're still on Bruce Bochy watch when it comes to these final 2 series, and let's see what his demeanor is the last two series of the year. And then finally, one of the biggest questions of the interview was about Josh Smith, because of his struggles in the second half of the season. It's now been mentioned by Chris Young that this is the second year in a row that this has happened. They're going to adjust and look at how they adjust the way he trains and maybe his play, usage, and see if they're using him too much. So expect Josh Smith's role to be completely different, or at least a little different than it was this past year in 2025. Very disappointing year, 2025, but it is a Turn the Page Tuesday, so we're going to turn the page and wash our hands, but we're going to talk about it. What we're going to talk about is, let's see, right here. Dissection. We are about to dissect and I think I spelt the word dissect right. If I did not spell the word dissect right, because I'm not an English guy, I'm barely a word man. You guys hear me? I can't think of words very well. But if I didn't spell the word dissection right, please comment below and subscribe and tell me every time I spell words wrong. It would mean a lot to me. And it'd mean a lot to me if you would go down this little road I'm going to go down, which is a dissection month to month of kind of what happened in Texas Rangers land in 2025. We're going to start in March and April. Such promise, such high hopes for this lineup, for this entire team in March and April. Some of the experts, didn't have as high hopes, and then some of them actually thought this was a World Series contender. And it started out like they were right, like the people who thought this was a World Series contender, like they might have been correct, because they were 8-2 in their first 10 games coming out of March. And then suddenly, like, things start to fall apart. And as the month goes on, they lose 2 of 3 to the Cubs at Wrigley, and then immediately get swept in Seattle. And so at that point in time in the season, they're 9-7, and there was certain things about the year that were already starting to really kind of bug some people, like the fact that they only scored 5 runs 5 times in those first couple of weeks of the season. And you're thinking, 5 runs, that seems like a lot. Well, for a team like the Rangers, the caliber of lineup that they had preseason and everything that was talked about, that this was going to be a team of slug, and that this was going to be a 5-run a game team. So to only have a third of the games be where the average was supposed to be just wasn't working out. And the pitching staff, the great saving grace of this whole year was the pitching staff, and the pitching staff had given up 3 or less runs in 9 of those games. So a complete kind of reversal of the way that everyone thought that this season was going to go, because they weren't hitting, but they were pitching very well, and DeGrom was healthy, so that was great. And so you come out of that Seattle series, a few games later, things are going bad. Scratch that, reverse. They came out of that Seattle series, and you sweep the Angels, which, kind of gets you going. Expectedly, you lose 2 out of 3 to the Dodgers. That wasn't really a big deal. But here is where this month gets away from you, and it's where that you can kind of pinpoint some times that the Rangers had a chance to maybe, make some space between 500. And here's what I'm talking about. They lose 3 straight series 2-1, 2 to the Athletics and 1 to the Giants. If that's reverse, if you can win 3 out of 3, those 3 series, if you can win those instead of lose those, your whole end of your month is different. Instead of 16 and 15, you're like 18, 19, and 19 and 13 maybe at the very something around there. You almost got 20 wins in the month. That can be managed, and the rest of the year kind of can be managed differently. But because of the struggles at the end of the month, 16 and 15, not a very good start to where we thought this team was going to be. The top performers, though, it was kind of promising, especially because Wyatt Langford that month hit .299, .972 OPS, 6 home runs, 12 RBIs. The dude was flying with 4 stolen bases, 5 doubles. We, as Ranger fans, thought that this was going to be the start of Wyatt Langford's just ascent into stardom, into the Mike Trout comparison, Mickey Mantle comparison, which I think is completely unfair. But we'll get to that some other point in time. Josh Smith was actually hitting well too, 303, 391 on base percentage, 11 walks in 23 games, and a 382 batting average of balls in play. Love that stat, because he was getting a lot of walks, and then when he was actually putting the ball in the play, he was either beating out, infield hits. The ball was squeaking through. Things were happening when he was up to the plate. And then Adolis Garcia, the batting average wasn't there, but he had 4 home runs in the month, 15 RBIs, led the team. But here was the big thing for me. when it came to Adolis in April. He played all the games. He wasn't hurt. No one had to sit him or anything like that, like it would happen later on in the year. So I think that was a really good at least start to the season for Adolis Garcia. And then the bottom feeders for April that continued to be pretty bad most of the year. Jock Peterson, legendary, terrible start to a season. 108 batting average, 380 OPS for Jock Peterson. That is abysmal. That is pee poor. He had 20 strikeouts in 22 starts. Just terrible. Jake Berger, not, and I don't want to pile on a guy like Jake because he was going through a really tough time in his personal life. So you have to wonder did that bleed over into the beginning of the season, batting 186 with a 330 slug. Again, Jake Berger was brought here to slug. That was his purpose. That's why you did not keep Nathaniel Lowe. You needed someone with more slug. Jake Berger was supposed to be that guy. He did not show it at the beginning of the year. 33 strikeouts, and he struck out a lot this year, especially at the end of the year. So that continued to go that way. And then Marcus Semien, again, a guy who was up and down. You'll see when we get to a later month that he had a really, really good June, I believe, maybe even July, and then really kind of, went down a hill again. But Marcus Semien, 182 batting average, 24 strikeouts, wasn't putting the ball in play. When he was putting the ball in play, he was only hitting 209. So it wasn't a good start for some very, very key portions of that lineup. And you have to remember, at that point in time, Marcus Semien was your leadoff hitter, hitting 182 with a 209 batting average with balls in play. It just was not working out. The lineup needed to be shifted around. Bochy did do some pretty good work later on when it came to trying to figuring out where the lineup could be its best, but the players did not execute. The thing that made you smile at the end of April was the fact that your team ERA was 3.27. You had 8.5 strikeouts per game. That was amazing. Tyler Mahle, Nathan Eovaldi, and Jacob deGrom were combined 6-3 with a 1.99 ERA. They had a complete game shutout with Eovaldi, and it was just looking like those three were going to be able to lead you. The terrible part of it was Luke Jackson, your closer, was awful with that. Was just awful. 6.55 ERA, and Kumar Rocker was not ready and continued to not be ready all year. You could see in April pretty much all the issues that were gonna plague this team. And so whenever we get later on to the later months, you'll see that all of this kind of continued and until it was really too late. So you can see March and April setting up for the entire 2025 season to be pretty disappointing. And speaking of disappointing, Merrill Kelly was absolutely disappointing as a trade deadline acquisition. So I went down and looked from 2009 to now and got a few really, really bad deadline duds, and I just want to talk about a couple of them right now. Koji Uehara in 2011. I actually met Koji. I'll find a picture of him, put him online. He had a 1.72 ERA in Baltimore. When he got here, he had a 4 ERA in Texas. He only gave up 5 home runs in 18 innings pitch here in Texas, and 3 home runs in the playoffs. He was awful. He was god-awful in the playoffs. But then, a couple of years later, he was ALCS MVP for Boston. Go figure. All right, Ryan Dipster was bad in 2012. 5.09 ERA when he got here to Texas. He did go 7-3, but he had a 1.43 WHIP. Not good. Last year to me was the worst. It was Andrew Chafin. Andrew Chafin was so bad because and the numbers don't really back it up too much. I mean, he had a 4.19 ERA, even though he had jumped up a full run from where he was at 3.16. But it just seemed like every time we needed somebody to make a hold, he couldn't do it. It just seemed like that in my head. I'm not sure if it was true. If it wasn't true, you can comment below. Please subscribe and tell me if I was definitely wrong about Andrew Chafin being bad. And this is the proof that Merrill Kelly has been bad. This year, Merrill Kelly, 3-3, 4.23 ERA. He's given up 9 home runs in 55 innings. The defensive problems were bad. It's really hard to picture this team with Merrill Kelly, Tyler Mahle, Evaldi and DeGrom all pitching so well and it not getting to the playoffs. The fact that two got hurt, and one was bad, and you only had DeGrom is one of the key reasons that the Texas Rangers did not make the playoffs this year and are fighting for their lives to even be at 500. We won't be fighting for our lives tomorrow. It is what is Wednesday? I don't even remember what Wednesday was. We're going to have fun Wednesday, and we're going to talk about lots of great Texas Rangers content. I love you. Monowia, stay gold, Pony Boy. This has been Texas Rangers Daily, brought to you by FanArch.